Post 2026 NFL draft, we have some big dynasty risers and some big dynasty fallers. What's up, everyone? I'm Ethan, and I'm here with my boy Garrett, and welcome back to High Fantasy. We got Garrett here, our resident dynasty expert, the guy that knows it all. He is going to give us his day 1, his day 2, his day 3 dynasty risers and fallers. We had some unique landing spots that I think really changed the trajectory of some of these dynasty values for some of these rookies. So let's get into it, starting with day 1. The first guy on our list is going to be Ty Simpson, a guy that went a lot earlier, right, G?
Absolutely. He went 113 overall in the real NFL draft. I mean, maybe 20 plus picks earlier than expected. I thought he was like an early second round talent personally, but hey, Les Need planted his flag, and as dynasty managers, we gotta listen to that, right? We gotta respond to that, and he's gonna be a guy who gets to sit behind Matt Stafford for at least a season, maybe 2, and he's gonna learn a lot. He's not gonna be thrown into the fire right away. He's gonna have time to develop, which he needs, right? Because he only started 15 games in college at Alabama, so he needs that time to kind of develop and learn. And once he gets plugged into the offense, it's hard to imagine a lot of offenses where he'll be better suited, you know what I mean? With Puka Nacua, I'm assuming McVay will still be there calling plays, but we'll see. I mean, he's a guy who he definitely gained value. I'd take him in the middle of the first round, late first round if you need a quarterback. There's worse picks that you can make.
Yep. The prime example of a dynasty quarterback that in the next couple of years could really, give you a good ROI on your investment. Next guy on your list, Carnell Tate, top 5 draft capital. Tell us about him.
Yeah, I love the landing spot here, man. And it's a little earlier than expected. You know, I didn't see a lot of mock drafts with Carnell Tate landing on the Titans, but getting paired up with Cam Ward is something that I just love, man. You know, Brian Dable is going to be scheming him open. He's the clear number 1 wide receiver on that offense. They invested top 5 capital in him. That's all the signal we need as dynasty owners. And, they got Wan'Dale Robinson out there to take some attention off. They got some other weapons like Calvin Ridley, decent tight end pieces. They got Io Manor, DK. So it's a deeper collection of weapons, but Carnell Tate is the clear alpha. I think he's going to get a ton of targets. He has the opportunity to go out there and be the number 1 target on the offense for the first time in his career, really, right? With Ohio State always being so loaded. He doesn't have to play second fiddle to Jeremiah Smith anymore. This is his time to shine. So 1-2 to 1-4 range. He's right in that mix, competing with Jordan Tyson and Fernando Mendoza. If you need a wide receiver, he's a great guy to grab.
As a Jags fan, it's a little scary that Titans team has improved a lot, but enough about that. Let's move on to another guy on your day 1 list, Jordan Tyson.
Yeah, speaking of the 102 to 104 range, this is another guy who's going to slot right into their top 10 draft capital, landing on the Saints, fantasy-friendly offense with Kellen Moore. It's something that, really, really, I think, improved his value and his outlook. And if he can stay healthy, that's really the only question mark we have. If he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be a wide receiver 2 or better as a rookie right away. He's going to get a lot of targets in that offense. They're probably going to pass the ball plenty. Tyler Shuck looked pretty promising as a rookie. And I mean, Chris Olave's out there on the other side. That's a pretty dynamic top 2 wide receiver core. So you really got to like it. If you're a Jordan Tyson fan, he gained a lot of value. And, confidently, I'm taking him in the top 5.
A guy that is probably the most athletic wide receiver on the list and has the most talent and upside, but those injuries dropped him down just a little bit, which is why he was, at the 108 spot, still didn't drop him down that much, but good landing spot. Next guy on our list, another, one of those kind of shocker, I think, of picks was Jadarian Price to the Seahawks in the first round.
Yeah, we saw some rumors that the Seahawks were looking at him at the end of the first, but most dynasty analysts did not buy it. They were saying, "Oh, it's a smoke screen. They're not actually going to take him day 1. It'll be day 2, at best." And hey, they proved him wrong, man. They really like Jadarian Price. He is apparently, the guy that they're betting on to replace Kenneth Walker. They didn't replace Walker in free agency, and they invested significant draft capital in Jadarian Price. I mean, anytime you get first round draft capital on a running back, that's a really good signal for dynasty rookie drafts. It's a guy that he's probably in that 1.6, 1.7 range if you need a running back. Some people may even consider taking him over Makai Lemon at 1.5. So he's a guy who gained a lot of value. He has to compete with Emmanuel Wilson, but he's probably going to get a lot of touches right away. Definitely more touches than he got in college while competing with Jeremiah Love. So I like the pick.
100%. I think he lands in a spot. I mean, no offense to Emmanuel Wilson, but I think Jadarian Price, they drafted him where they did to make him the number one guy coming in. So
Yes, sir.
now let's go to the day one fallers. Unfortunately, there's some guys that we loved on this list, but they have to be some fallers. First guy being Casey Concepcion when he landed with the Browns. Still got day one draft capital, though.
Yeah, that's a good caveat, I think, to mention, because if a guy's going on round one, they're not a big faller, right? They still got significant draft capital invested. So it's just a slight faller. The Browns landing spot is not ideal, especially considering they drafted
You could be
another
the number
wide
one
receiver.
overall pick.
Yeah, early on day two, they grabbed Denzel Boston. They still have Jerry Jeudy. Harold Fannin is a bona fide stud at tight end who commands a lot of targets, and they don't have the quarterback position figured out just yet. So might take some patience on Casey Concepcion as a dynasty manager, kind of wait until they address quarterback next year in the 2027 draft, which is absolutely littered with first round quarterback prospects. So it could be figured out sooner rather than later. Maybe Shedeur Sanders surprises some people this year with the improved weaponry, but he's a guy who's falling a little bit for me, not quite as bullish as I was heading into the draft.
Yeah, and also with that run game with the Browns too, with Quinshon Judkins, I know they're going to rely on him quite a bit too. But definitely hopeful for Casey Concepcion because we loved him as a talent at Texas A&M. Another guy on your list, Makai Lemon, who we mentioned. Maybe he gets moved down that ADP board, right? Now that he landed with the Eagles, which might be surprising to some people that he's a faller.
Yeah, he's a guy who was going 1.2 to 1.4 range for a lot of guys, pre-draft, but he's probably the more consensus 105. Maybe he falls to 106 even in some drafts, but I would guess 105 is right where he settles in. This is not an indictment on the talent, because I know you and I both love the prospect, coming into the draft. I think it's more of just the situation, right? Because he has a lot of target competition. It is a very run-heavy offense with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, Saquon Barkley in the backfield. He has to compete with not only Devontae Smith, not only Dallas Goedert, but they also drafted Eli Stowers. So that's going to be kind of a long-term, target magnet kind of in the middle of the field, right where Makai Lemon operates. So there's a little bit of uncertainty with just how many targets can this guy command, and is it going to take a little bit of patience? We'll see. I think AJ Brown's probably gone, so that's going to open up some targets, but we'll see how it works out, man. I still love the talent. I'm not saying don't take him at 105. I just think he could have gotten a better landing spot. That's all.
Yeah, I think the unpredictability for me is a little bit what makes me a little bit hesitant, right? Like AJ Brown could blow up one game because they really needed to rely on him, or the run game was just so dominant that he got targeted once in the game, So for fantasy value, when you want consistency, it can be tough when you have a guy that's in such a high-powered running offense. But love the talent. Hopefully he proves us wrong.
Yes, sir.
And that wraps up our day one risers and fallers. Let's go to day two. Deshaun Stribling, the 49ers really, some people think they reached on him, a guy that kind of wasn't hugely on our radar going into the draft. But man, do we think he's going to make a splash, huh?
Yeah, probably the biggest riser out of all the day two guys. I mean, he was not on a lot of dynasty or fantasy analysts' radar, but he was on the 49ers radar, and they really like what he can do in their scheme, man. I mean, talk about long-term opportunity too. I know they signed Mike Evans, they signed Christian Kirk, George Kittle's still there, but all of those guys are kind of on the back end of their career, not necessarily long-term solutions there for them. They do have Ricky Pearsall, who's a younger guy who's still going to be around for a while, but they took Dejon Stribling for a reason, man. This guy's
Yep.
4.36 speed, 6'2", over 200 pounds. He has the size, he has the speed. He can go up and snag the ball. He can make things happen after the catch with that incredible speed. He was the number one offense on that Ole Miss, or number one wide receiver, excuse me, on that Ole
Mhm.
Miss offense. And, in some really big games down the stretch, he was a big performer. So I like what he can do long term for the 49ers offense.
And he kind of has that underdog mentality, right? Like nobody thought that Ole Miss would be pushing to make the potentially the national championship, right? And they just like kept getting better and better at the end of the season. So I like his trajectory, and I think the 49ers is like the perfect type of scheme to take a guy who is under the radar and make him a star. So
Yeah.
like him as a riser as well. Let's now look at Antonio Williams, where he landed with the Commanders.
Yeah, day two capital, great opportunity to establish himself as Jaden Daniels' number two option. Terry McLaurin is still going to be the alpha there, but there's a ton of opportunity behind
Mm.
him, man. I mean, talk about a good quarterback and a lot of opportunity. This is a great landing spot for him. Early third round was pretty good draft capital as well. So you got to think they're going to give him every opportunity to earn that starting slot role in the offense. And even if they add Brandon Ayuk, at some point, I still think I'm still pretty bullish on this guy. You can
Yeah.
even reach on him if you want to grab him. You can grab him end of the first round in rookie drafts. You can grab him early to mid second if he falls. I think that's kind of the sweet spot for him. So keep your eye on him, see if he falls, see if he's, on other people's radar.
When even if Ayuk does get signed, I mean, yeah, Williams is one injury away, between Scary Terry and Brandon Ayuk to like being definitely the solid wide receiver 2, and maybe even kind of the wide receiver 1A, 1B kind of option. So great landing spot. Hopefully Jane Daniels can bounce back in year 3. Another guy that I think people were a little bit shocked at for the 49ers was Kaelon Black, huh?
Yeah, Kalen Black, Indiana. He was the number one running back for that national championship offense. And I don't think a lot of people expected him to go this early. And I don't think a lot of people expected him to land in such a fantasy friendly backfield, man. I mean,
Mm.
people want to talk about Shanahan missing on running backs, but what about when he hits on running backs, man? It's definitely something that you want to take a risk on. In this draft class, there's not a ton of sure things. It's all kind of upside bets. So if I can grab a guy like Kalen Black in the third round, I'm doing it every time because the kid runs really hard. You see, how he ran for Indiana last year. He finds the hole. He's a chunk play guy. He's gonna hit it really hard. And I don't know, man. I think that they have to take a little bit of the load off of CMC next year. So
Yeah,
if he
agreed.
can win that number two running back role in training camp, he's a guy who could really gain a lot of value as the season goes on.
Yeah, even with a healthy CMC, even last season you saw Brian Robinson Jr. Get some touches, as the RB2 last year for the 49ers, but he's also just one CMC injury away from being like very much fantasy relevant as a
Yeah.
rookie. Especially if he could win that RB2 job. So definitely a guy that I think you can, if you have some of those third round picks that you've been stowing up, I know, G, you love to save up those third and fourth round picks, but a guy that I think would be a perfect opportunity to take in that third round. All right, a little tandem on this. The tandem wide receivers that the Dolphins took. Why are they on our rising list? G.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think a lot of people predicted Caleb Douglas going off the board before Chris Bell. That was a little bit of a shock for me, at least. And they double tapped wide receiver in the third round. So they did not take a wide receiver, in that first round range like a lot of people were projecting them to, but they threw a lot of darts, on day 2 and day 3. And if I'm choosing one of these guys, I think I'm going Chris Bell just because he was one of my top rated wide receivers in the class pre NFL draft. Caleb Douglas was not really on my radar, But hey, if you can grab Caleb Douglas in the fourth round, go ahead. That's pretty good draft capital.
Yep.
And both these guys are going to have early opportunity on the Dolphins. Chris Bell is recovering from that knee injury, so maybe Caleb Douglas gets the first crack. And then once Chris Bell is healthy, he kind of factors in a little bit more late season. But you could do worse than both of these guys. There's a ton of opportunity right there in that
Yeah.
offense, after they move Jalen Waddle. So,
Yeah, I mean, the Dolphins, I feel like, have a identity crisis, and if they're going to be successful, they're going to need somebody to step up as a true wide receiver weapon for them. And so, why not one of these two guys go into an opportunity where there's nothing in front of them? Go ahead,
yeah.
it's theirs to lose, or that, I feel like this is one of the most unique landing spots because there's not a true alpha in front of them that's just like taking all their touches and their targets away. So definitely curious to see how the season goes for these two and the Dolphins in general with Malik Willis. So let's
Yeah.
move on to another tandem, separate teams, but two quarterbacks kind of in that same tier, Carson Beck and Drew Allar.
Yeah, I mean, this comes down to day two capital, QBs in quarterback rooms without a clear long-term starter. You look at Arizona. Jacoby Brissett wants a pay raise. He's kind of in contract negotiations right now with the team. There's some uncertainty there. And if you look at what Carson Beck would be playing with, you got Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside. You got Trey McBride at tight end. You got Jeremiah Love at running back. So it's a pretty good situation for a guy to be, slotted into. So if he gets some time to play as a rookie, he could be a guy who kind of surprises some people. And then Drew Allar, again, another QB room with some uncertainty long term. Is Aaron Rodgers going to come back? We still don't know. Will Howard, they drafted last year, but a lot of people like Drew Allar's upside more than Will Howard, just as far as pure arm talent and arm strength goes. He's an interesting fit for that offense. And if you look at Penn State, he never really had very good wide receivers. He none of those guys are getting drafted. So he's going to have a better wide receiver room than he ever had in college. He's a guy who has a chance to be better as a pro than he was as a college football quarterback.
Carson Beck, gotta like toot my horn a little bit here, but Carson Beck definitely went higher than most people thought. And he was a guy on my list that I was like, I could see him sneaking up the draft boards for some of these teams. And I think he landed on a perfect spot with the Cardinals. I mean, Jacoby Brissett is one injury, a couple bad games away from why not give Carson Beck a shot, right? And with all those offensive weapons, I mean, he would have a field day just chucking that ball around. And, like you mentioned, he's a guy that would have just studs around him. So I think he is in a position I would throw a dart at him for sure, because, if he can get the reins on this team with the talent around him, could be scary. Now let's get to our day two fallers. First guy on our list, Denzel Boston. Why is he a faller, G?
Solid draft capital, right? Top of the second round, but poor landing spot is really what it comes down to. He has to compete for targets with Casey Concepcion, who I liked more as a prospect. Not to mention Harold Fannin Jr., who's a target magnet. Jerry Jeudy's still there. Just a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of uncertainty at quarterback, at least until 2027, assuming they draft the right guy, next year, which is not a guarantee, with that Browns franchise. So I just don't like the landing spot, but if you have some patience with him, he could be a guy who produces a little bit more year two and beyond.
Could be that red zone target guy. Another guy on our list, Eli Stowers, landed with the Eagles.
Yeah, this one hurts me because I love Stowers as a prospect. He's one of my favorite tight end prospects. I even had him ahead of Kenyon Sadiq personally. So he's a guy I was very, very high on, but I just don't love the landing spot. Makai Lemon landing there too. They both kind of operate in the same areas of the field, which isn't great. It's a run-heavy offense, and not to mention Devontae Smith, who's probably the number one option, is still going to be there for the foreseeable future. So just don't love the landing spot for fantasy purposes. I do think it's a great pick for the Eagles, though.
100%, a lot of talent. Another faller, another tight end, Max Klare, and he landed with the kind of crowded tight end room in the Rams.
Yeah, man, another round 2 tight end after they picked Terrence Ferguson last year, who I know both of us liked quite a bit coming out of Oregon. So,
Yeah.
which guy is going to win the job there long term? There's definitely some uncertainty. Colby Parkinson and Tyler Higbee are still there for next year. So, neither of those guys, I don't know if either of the young guys are going to be huge target earners next year. We'll see what happens. But Klare was a guy I did like as a prospect. So, if you want to take a dart throw on him in the third, maybe early fourth of your rookie draft, you can go ahead and do that. It's pretty good draft capital, but very, a lot of uncertainty there.
Yep. Rams do love using their 2 and 3 tight ends, though, so we never know.
Yep.
Another tight end, Sam Roush, landed with another crowded tight end room, the Bears.
Yeah, you said it, man. It's just no real path to a significant target share, man. I liked him as a sleeper tight end, but he's buried behind Loveland. Even if they get rid of Komet eventually, he's still going to be the number 2 tight end option in that receiving room. And not to mention they have Rome Odunze and Luther Burden commanding a big target share as well. So just don't really see a lot of, fantasy relevance for Sam Roush, unfortunately.
And let's get to Chris Brazzell or Brazzell, however you pronounce it, landed with the Panthers.
Yeah, and this is a guy who, maybe some people like the landing spot more than I do, but personally I love Jalen Coker. So I'm a little bit biased, when I'm analyzing that wide receiver room. I think it's Tate McMillan, I think it's Jalen Coker, and then I think Chris Brazzell's the number 3 option with Bryce Young. So is he a guy with some upside? Definitely, but he also has significant bust risk coming out of Tennessee. So I don't know. Personally, I think he could have had a better landing spot. He could have had better draft capital. So not a huge faller, but he's fallen a little bit down my rankings personally.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's get to our day 3 risers and fallers, starting with Jonah Coleman, one of our favorites going into the draft.
Sure, everyone's going to point to, Dobbins is already there, RJ Harvey's already there. They paid Dobbins a good amount of money. They drafted Harvey pretty early last year, but when you look at that offense and you look at Sean Payton, I just think that he could be the most complete back in that running back room. And J.K. Dobbins is constantly getting hurt, unfortunately for him. Harvey's not really a every down back. I think he's more of a change of pace receiving back. So could Jonah Coleman be more relevant than people think? Absolutely. 4th round capital is not terrible. He's a guy who could surprise some people. So he's rising a little bit. May seem counterintuitive with the landing spot, but that's a very good offense, very good offensive line. So you could do worse.
And Sean Payton doesn't care what round you're drafted in. So best guy plays. Next guy, Brenen Thompson, landed with the Chargers in that new Mike McDaniels offense.
Yeah, people are going to get tired of hearing me talk about the little guy, Brenen Thompson, but he's just such an exciting talent. Maybe I'm a little bit biased towards the underdog, smaller receivers, but he's such a jitterbug. He's such a good separator, and he can take the top off the defense like none other. So with Justin Herbert's arm over the top, I think he could be a guy, especially in best ball type leagues where the spike weeks are a little bit more acceptable. I think he could be a guy to target, mid-third, late-third of your rookie drafts.
Next guy on our list, another wide receiver, Allar to UConn, landed with the Bills. A wide-open wide receiver room.
You got DJ Moore there, and then a lot of uncertainty. There's Khalil Shakir as well, who I think, is kind of a similar prospect to Skyler Bell. But Bell had huge production last year at UConn, man. I mean, he was very good. He's explosive. He's a fast guy after the catch. He can do a lot. So if he can go in there and earn some targets, you got Josh Allen throwing you the ball. That's always going to be fantasy friendly, man. So there's a lot of upside there. He did fall to the 4th round, but talk about opportunity. He has all the opportunity in the world with Josh Allen as his quarterback.
100%. Nick Singleton, a guy that has just slowly dropped since beginning of the college football season, but what a good landing spot for an explosive running back.
Yeah, a lot of people thought Jeremiah Love might be landing on the Titans, but Nicholas Singleton was the guy who they got, a little bit later in the 5th round, but opportunity is there. Tony Pollard is probably a guy on the back end of his career. Tajay Spears hasn't really met expectations so far.
Mm.
So if Nick Singleton can break into that running back room, he's a guy with a ton of upside. He's a great receiver, great athlete, 4.3 speed, 220. You could do a lot worse with a dart throw, end of the second if you need a running back.
100%. And then Justin Joly landed with the Broncos, who we talked about not too long ago with Jonah Coleman. Tell us about him. Why was he a riser?
Doing Evan Ingram a little dirty, right? Looking dusty out there
Former
on the
Giant
side.
and former Jag.
Yeah, man. I'm soured on Evan Ingram just a little bit. He's a guy who had a great career, but he just didn't really look like himself last year. I think the injuries may have caught up to him. Joly was a guy who had a lot of targets in college for NC State. He was very consistent, very steady. I think he could be, a significant contributor. I know he only got 5th round draft capital. That's an offense we want to target, and the tight end room is wide open. So I like Justin Joly as a sleeper.
And then Nick Singleton's counterpart at Penn State, Kaytron Allen, also with the Commanders. We've talked about the Commanders and how that's a pretty favorable landing spot for some of these rookies. Tell us about him a little bit more.
Yeah, honorable mention for you guys. Another, if you need a running back, another guy you can target. He may be just better, as a pure runner, pure talent than Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt or Rachaad White. Now, is he going to be like an every down guy who gets a huge receiving share? Probably not. As long as Rachaad White is there, he's probably going to be the pass catcher. But could he beat out JCM for like the early down workhorse role eventually? Yeah, I'd rather take a upside shot on him than some of the other guys that are going ahead of him in rookie drafts right now. So if I could snag him in the 3rd round, I'm all over it.
100%. All right, let's wrap things up with our day 3 fallers. First on our list, we have Mike Washington, who landed on the Raiders behind Ashton Jeanty.
R.I.P., man. We had big hopes for Mike Washington after that 4.3 340 at over 220 pounds at the combine. There was rumors that he could go round 2 to Seattle. That did not happen. We didn't see the draft capital. He fell to the 4th round, and the landing spot is absolutely brutal. He's going to be a handcuff. So, it's not like he's completely dead, right? Because there is the handcuff option where Ashton Jeanty gets hurt. Mike Washington comes in and surprises some people. Kubiak does tend to use multiple back systems at times, but, I'm not betting on this guy having a lot of work as a rookie.
Yep. It's a bummer of a landing spot. Trey Lance's younger brother, landed with the Saints with a pretty crowded wide receiver room.
Yep. 4th round pick in the NFL draft. He's likely the 4th option at best in that offense. You got Chris Olave, Jordan Tyson. You got Jawan Johnson. They drafted Oscar Delp. They have, Bailey as well as a veteran. So there's a lot of target competition.
ETN, Kamara.
It's rough out here, man. So I really don't like the landing spot. Still has some upside as a prospect, but I don't really see him being an early contributor.
And then Emmett Johnson landing with the Chiefs in the middle of the middle end of the 5th round.
Yep, and I mean there was rumors that the Chiefs were very surprised that he fell to them at that spot, but at the end of the day, they just paid Kenneth Walker a boatload of money. He's going to be the guy. He's going to be the workhorse in that backfield. So not a lot of upside unless Kenneth Walker gets hurt, which he has had some injury problems in the past. So you could do worse if you want to draft Emmett Johnson late 2nd round, early 3rd round. He's a fine handcuff option, but we were hoping for a better landing spot and better draft capital.
Another guy that fell hard in this draft, I think people were surprised, Garrett Nussmeier, dropping to the Chiefs in the 7th round.
7th round, man, that is rough. So Carson, Beck, Drew Allar, big risers. Garrett Nussmeier, big faller. He's probably not even the quarterback 2 on that offense, right? Justin Fields is there behind Patrick Mahomes. So really brutal landing spot, really brutal draft capital. He's pretty much off my board.
Yeah. Boner. You got Deion Burks, who landed with the Colts, who fell to the 7th round in a, very run-heavy offense.
Yeah, and he's a very athletic guy, so I think most people expected him to be like a day 2 guy. Fell all the way to the 7th round. He's going to be behind Alec Pierce and Josh Downs and Tyler Warren, so he's at best the 4th option. And it's like you said, a very run-heavy offense with Jonathan Taylor and Danny Dimes running the ball left and right. So don't love him as a fantasy option in rookie drafts.
All right, that is the end of our list. Let us know in the comments if you disagree with any of our picks.
Peace.